Good morning, everyone, and good to see you all here today. Well, we've been discussing a difficult text, the Heart Sutra, and I think the Heart Sutra is perhaps something that you can kill by overthinking it. So we're running that risk here. But also if you hear it without any context, without any background, or without understanding where it's coming from, it just sounds like crazy talk. So it's helpful to at least get beyond it sounding like crazy talk. Last week we talked about the first sentence, which we'll come back to again and again because it, in some ways, contains the core of the message. Avalokiteshvara, when deeply practicing prajnaparamita, clearly saw that all five aggregates are empty and thus relieved all suffering. Avalokiteshvara, as you recall, is the bodhisattva of compassion, a mythical figure. And she is talking to us about wisdom, paramita, prajnaparamita, complete wisdom, or wisdom beyond words. So, in this sentence, she expresses a realization about the five skandhas, the five aggregates, the five ingredients from which we bake a personality or a self, being the material ingredient of form and the mental ingredients of feeling, perception, fabrication, and consciousness. Those words are translated in various ways. But during her contemplation, her meditation on this, she realizes how flimsy these things are, how they are constantly in flux, constantly changing, and dependent on causes and conditions, lacking an essential essence, but instead being part of a process, which she terms emptiness. And as a result of this realization, she gains freedom from suffering. Now it says here, relieves all suffering. And we'll talk about this more, but I tend to think of it more in terms of freedom from suffering. Now, as we go along farther in the Heart Sutra, it may seem as if there's a repudiation, a denial of fundamental Buddhist teachings, of the teachings of the Buddha that appear in the early literature, which was written in Pali, P-A-L-I, the language of the first recorded teachings that we have. It may seem as if this is about throwing all those out. But I think that's a misreading of the text. And to support that, I would like to go back to one of the suttas from the Pali Canon and read sections of it that I think will help us understand what's going on later on in the Heart Sutra. And these readings come from a sutta in the middle length discourses called the Simile of the Cobra. And there is a parable about a cobra, but there's also a parable about a raft, and that's the one that I'm going to be reading from. Suppose there was a person traveling along the road, and they see a large deluge whose near shore was dubious and perilous, while the far shore was a sanctuary, free of peril. But there was no ferry boat or bridge for crossing over, and they'd think, why don't I gather grass, sticks, branches, and leaves and make a raft? Riding on the raft and paddling with my hands and feet, I can safely reach the far shore. And so they do exactly that, riding on the raft and paddling with hands and feet. And when they crossed over to the far shore, they'd think, this raft has been very helpful to me. Riding on this raft, I have safely crossed over to the far shore. Why don't I hoist it on my head? Why don't I hoist it on my head or pick it up on my shoulder and go wherever I want? What do you think, mendicants? The Buddha is speaking to his students here. Would that person be doing what should be done with that raft? No, sir, they respond. And what, mendicants, should that person do with the raft? When they crossed over, they should think, this raft has been helpful to me. Why don't I beach it on the dry land or set it adrift on the water and go wherever I want? That's what that person should do with the raft. In the same way, I have taught a simile of the teaching as a raft for crossing over, not for holding on. By understanding the simile of the raft, you will even give up the teachings, let alone what is not the teachings. So the Buddha here is advising us not to hold on to these words that he is speaking, the words that he spoke during 40 years of teaching, not to hold on to those too tightly and too literally, but to use them to establish a direction for movement through life. And then to let them go. He goes on to talk about something quite relevant, I think, to the Heart Sutra. Mendicants, there are 6 grounds for views. What 6? Take an unlearned, ordinary person who has not seen the noble ones and is neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the noble ones. They've not seen true persons and are neither skilled nor trained in the teaching of the true persons. They regard form as, this is mine, I am this is myself. They also regard feeling, perception, fabrications, whatever is seen, heard, thought, known, attained, sought, and explored by the mind as, this is mine, I am this is myself. And as for the 6th ground for views, beyond the 5 skandhas, is the view, the cosmos and the self are one and the same. After death, I will be that. Permanent, everlasting, eternal, imperishable, and will last forever and ever. They regard this also as, this is mine, I am this is myself. But a learned, noble disciple has seen the noble ones and is skilled and trained in the teaching of the noble ones. They've seen true persons and are skilled and trained in the teaching of the true persons. They regard form like this. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. They also regard feeling, perception, fabrications, whatever is seen, heard, thought, known, attained, sought, and explored by the mind like this. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. And the same for this ground for views. The cosmos and the self are one and the same. After death, I will be that, permanent, everlasting, eternal, imperishable, and will last forever and ever. They also regard like this is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. Seeing in this way, they are not anxious about that which is not the case. It is when someone thinks, oh, it once was mine, but is mine no longer. Oh, it could be mine, but I do not get it. Then they sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. That's how there is anxiety about that which is not the case. Mendicants, it would make sense to be possessive about something that is permanent, everlasting, eternal, imperishable, and will last forever and ever. But do you see any such possession? No, sir, they respond. Good, mendicants. I also can't see any such possession. It would make sense to grasp at a theory of self that didn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. But do you see any such theory of self? No, sir, they respond. Good, mendicants. I also can't see any such theory of self. It would make sense to rely on a view that didn't give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. But do you see any such view to rely upon? No, sir. Good mendicants, I also can't see such a view to rely upon. So, again, the Buddha is emphasizing that he is not advancing any particular theory, any particular metaphysical theory or ontological theory about self. Philosophers to this day are debating such theories, back and forth, round and round. The Buddha, instead, advises abandoning such theories, setting them aside. So how you might ask, are you supposed to function in the world without some theory of self? Idea about what the self is, notion of self. In Mahayana Buddhism, the solution to that is living by vow, appealing to wisdom beyond wisdom. And in each situation that we find ourselves, to think, how can I be of benefit, of long-term benefit to myself and others in this situation? Allowing us to move through life without the stickiness of worrying about a self. Now, this all may sound kind of confusing and subtle, and I think it is. But that, I believe, is part of the message of the Heart Sutra. I'm reminded of for some reason this stuck in my head. I saw this in an episode of Doctor Who many years ago, and I don't know why it struck me so. Doctor Who, if you're not familiar with the series, is a British TV drama, a sort of drama comedy, sort of drama science fiction comedy, but it revolves around a character, Doctor Who is traveling through a very strange universe. And I won't get into all the details, but there was one episode where one of his compatriots was a woman warrior, kind of along the lines of Diana or Brunhilde, just a warrior woman. And in the course of the episode, Doctor Who and this warrior woman walked into a room, and the woman said, "I feel fear." And you could tell by the fact that she was somewhat surprised by this, that she didn't often feel fear. But she said, "I feel fear." And that struck me, because one might easily say, I'm afraid. I am afraid. Identifying with the fear, which is a different situation to put yourself in than that of just observing the fear, sensing it. Because feeling fear can invite curiosity. What's causing the fear? Why do I feel fear? What about this situation is threatening? Do I need to do anything? Whereas I am afraid just sort of leaves you stuck in fear, identifying with the fear, being encompassed by it. It's perhaps a subtle distinction, but I think it's important. And I think that's part of what the Buddha is advocating, that we're going to have a form, we're going to have feelings, we're going to have perceptions. We're going to have fabrications, which are the stories that we make up about what we're perceiving, based on our past experience, based on causes and conditions. All those things will arise in the mind. But we don't have to identify with them. We don't have to say, this is me, this is what I am. We can say, not me, not mine, not what I am. And then have curiosity about what's going on. What do I need to do? How can I be of benefit? And move on through life. I think I'll stop there so that there'll be time for discussion, and we'll continue on with this in weeks to come. But I guess I would leave you with a question about how language can affect, to the extent to which we identify with thoughts, opinions, feelings, sensations. How, in a sense, language invites us to identify with these things. And instances you may have noticed, either in yourself or others, where you get caught up in such identifications. So we'll leave on that and then go into breakout rooms and return in a few minutes. I appreciate your being here. I appreciate your listening, and we'll see you in a few moments.